welcome Ashley to Metal Pages. It's a great pleasure to talk with you about Voyager, this new album, Fearless in Love, and more things related into the metal in general. So we start when I think when a common question: how has band been the band during the last years? Because your last album, Colors in the Sun, was released, I think, at the beginning of the pandemic, because we started the pandemic at the end of 2019, and now you are
Mm.
releasing the new album. So 4 years later.
Yeah, that's a long break for us.
Yes.
Um, yeah, it was funny because Colors in the Sun really, we didn't really get the opportunity to do everything we wanted with that album. We were, as with any album, we were very proud of it. We wanted to do a lot of touring. We wanted to do maybe some more videos, but yeah, some things happened in the world and made that a bit hard. So we didn't really get to explore what we could do with that album, maybe to its full potential. But of course, all that time, sort of spent at home and not being able to do it much, gave us a chance to write another album. So that's a good thing.
Okay. Well, I will ask about your participation in the Euro song. So with two songs, the last year and this year. So how did you enter to this contest? Because it's very sometimes for a metal band it's a little difficult sometimes.
Yeah. We've been, you know, for years now, like especially when we've toured Europe, people have said to us, you guys would be great at Eurovision. And we're like, oh, we think so too, but we're from Australia. That's not something that's going to happen. But then Australia could enter. So as soon as we found out that was possible, we thought, oh, let's go for it. I mean, what band would not want to play Eurovision? It's a huge stage. There's so many people watching. We always knew it would be a lot of fun. So we started off with like hashtags and messages and stuff to, all the various producers and television places in Australia, like just doing what we could, to try and get there. We never, I mean, if I'm honest with myself, I never really thought we'd probably make it there, but it was always a nice thing to try. Um, but in 2019, I believe it was, when Runaway was shortlisted for the Australian final, um, we got an invitation to actually attend that Eurovision, which Danny and I did. So we had to fly to the other side of the country for that one. And I'm pretty sure that we sort of we talked our way into the after party afterwards, and and then talked our way into the VIP area upstairs so we could meet the producers and go, oh, thanks for inviting us. We really like the contest and everything, and maybe one day we'll be able to participate and everything like that. And the one of the producers talks about that moment to this day. So I think like just showing how dedicated we were and how enthusiastic we were about the competition was a really good step for us. Then it was just a matter of writing a couple of really good songs, I think.
Okay, okay. Well, one thing about your enter to the band, I remember that you entered to the band 2011. I perhaps 2010. That's normally the confusion of the times. But 3 years later or 4 years later, the Voyager lands an Five, album that changed completely the discography of the band. Because I remember when I hear the meaning of I, it's very different. Five is more pop, it's more electronic, a lot of things. So did you think no, but did you form part of the composition area in Five, or just you follow the concept that at the time the members has?
I'm not 100% sure exactly if there was anything different about how Voyager composed when I joined the band, because obviously I wasn't a part of it beforehand. They do mention sometimes that they, like Voyager, were less inclined to sort of just like jam in the rehearsal room and try and write songs that way. I think previously a lot of the time, like Danny or Simone or Alex or Scott would like bring very close to fully formed songs to rehearsal, and people would sort of like add their parts to it. My background was more, yeah, sitting in a rehearsal room and playing and playing and playing until the song kind of found itself. So I don't know if anything necessarily changed in that regard, but I do recall like, even before I was in the band, when I was just a fill-in drummer, I remember, Danny playing a bit of hyperventilating, and we experimented on that a little bit. And it seemed to work really well, sort of writing live like that. Um, so yeah, maybe there's a sense of immediacy to writing that way. Maybe that does tend to simplify things a little bit, or makes them more direct, or maybe it does bring more of a pop approach because you're writing how you feel. rather than like as a band, rather than sort of like writing by yourself. So I'm not really sure, but yeah, I think as well, like, when I joined the band, it really seemed to fit very well. And I think, as a testament to that, what is it now? 12 years on, it's the same lineup. And I don't think Voyager's ever had a stable lineup for 12 years. I think like before I came in, it was maybe 3 or 4 years maximum. So maybe it was just a matter of us all like finding each other and finding a lineup that works. And that sort of, changed our songwriting that way.
Okay. Returning to the Euro contest area. So as you know, with Dreamer or Promise, that songs that you played in Euro contest for 2 years. So at that one until now you are a massive progressive metal band because you are in all radios, all TVs. Even I think the Euro contest transmission was in outside of the earth. So it's possible. So how do you feel about now the Voyager has a different kind of approach compared to the other progressive metal bands? Because to play in a pop contest is very different to play in Bakken.
Yeah, I think I think we'd maybe slot in about as well at Wacken as we would slot in at Eurovision. Like we're not the heaviest band in the world. We're not the poppiest band in the world. We're kind of, a little bit of each. And when you look at some of the bands that we've, played with, like, Nightwish and, Vola and things like, I think we've supported, Catatonia as well. Like there's all just like different kinds of metal bands that we've played with, and it always seems to work well. When we did that tour with Leprous in Australia and Europe, like on paper it seems a bit weird. Like Leprous is kind of this more like introspective, kind of deep, sort of sadder band, and we're this, especially live, a bit more of an upbeat pop party band. But it just works really well for some reason. I don't know why that is. I like to think with Eurovision, there's a lot of people out there who don't listen to metal because they don't like, it's not that they don't like it, but they assume that I don't like metal. You know what I mean? I don't like aggressive stuff. I don't want someone yelling at me. But when they actually hear a band like us, they go, oh, I really like some of the stuff that's in here. I can get behind like a dirty bass, or, I can get behind maybe having one growl in a song. You know what I mean? So when I think about us in Eurovision, I think, we're flying the flag for prog. And I think there's a lot of people out there who like to listen to prog music, but have just never dipped their toes in, never bothered to look at it because they've maybe prejudged it or just thought that's not really for me. So I hope that, like, one of the things we do is we because we are maybe a little bit more accessible and a little bit more focused on the pop aesthetic of what we do, hopefully we're like a gateway drug to more of the prog scene for a lot of people who've seen us at Eurovision.
Okay. Well, I saw that since the Colors in the Sun, the band are very active with singles, The Boys in Life, Dreamer, Submarine, when a lot of things happen since that time to now. So Fearless is Love. So for you, talking about the singles, as you can see now, are the people want to hear the music just by single, no hearing anymore the album. So for you, which is the best single besides the Dreamer and Promise, that I think are the most played song that you have in the digital platforms. So for you, which song of this Fearless and Lost is the best way to understand the whole concept of the album?
Wow, that's a big question. I think I think it would be, if I had to narrow it down to one song, I might say something like Twisted. It's not a single yet. Might be in the future, but I think Twisted has a really good balance of it's got like heavy parts, like, a lot of what you might call the chorus is a big double kick section, which is a bit of a contrast to the rest of the album. I don't focus on double kicks too much in Voyager, but when they're called for, I'm definitely happy to chuck them in. But then there's like, the intro to the song is like an electro kind of 4 to the floor, just bass drum pulse. There's lots of straight ahead rock beats in there. and it's a good combination of like the heavy things that we do as a metal band, but also the more poppy sort of tight songwriting things we do is that kind of band. So I think Twisted is a good one, just to get an aesthetic of what Voyager does. With that said, I think a track like The Lamenting or maybe the title track, Gren, Fearless in Love, is maybe a good introduction to the emotional core of the album. I've never really thought of Voyager as being a band that writes hugely emotional songs, but there's something about this album that just feels really personal, and there's a really really strong kind of personal thread running through the entire album. It's a lot more organic. It's a lot more raw, and I think there is like that way to connect with this album that I think maybe the title track does. So that might be a good one to listen to if you're going to listen to one track for the album.
Okay, okay. One thing that captured my attention is about the name of the album, Fearless in Love, because well, and I saw the cover as like a yin yang talking about the union of the people, so because those two people are handing their hands, or trying to have connection between them. So, but why did you decide to put Fearless in Love? Because for so many people, fearless, well, love is one of the biggest feelings that the human has.
I think yeah, it's interesting you mentioned that about the cover art as well, because I like the ambiguity of about it. Like there are two hands reaching to each other, but you don't know the context of that. Like that could be before they pull apart, or that could be them coming together. And it's a bit like that on the album as well. Like you're right, like love is one of the biggest emotions that humans can feel, but there's so many different kinds of love. There's unrequited love, there's romantic love, there's like brotherly love, there's love for your family, there's love for what you do, like there's love of music. And love stories can be really like, they can fill your heart. Love stories can be really sad. There's a whole spectrum of what we talk about when we talk about love. And I like to think of the album as like, 11 different love songs, but they're all very different parts of the love story. They're not all necessarily happy romantic songs. I think as well, just because we were maybe a little bit more exposed on this album, and I think we're at sort of the point in our career as well where, we are, you can be in the industry long enough and realize that if you don't do this sort of thing, if you don't play music because you love it, you're not going to find a whole lot else to enjoy in the industry, because it's a hard industry. The rewards don't often come. I mean, when they do, they're fantastic. And I would say that playing music is always very rewarding, whether you're playing with your friends, playing with 5 people, or you're playing Eurovision. So I think part of it for us was that the album was a big celebration of just the joy for what we do as a band, and the love that we have for each other. We spend a lot of time together, and we all work really hard together. And also, we've all got our families and our partners who we owe a lot to for all the support that they give us with everything we have to do, from touring to Eurovision. It's a lot of time away, it's a lot of money, that sort of thing. So it's I guess just embracing all of that and trying to celebrate it a little bit with this album, however imperfect it may be.
Okay. Well, other aspects about this new album is the names of the songs, because Prince of Fire, Dreamers, The Lamenting, Submarine, Promise, Twisted, Daydream, Listen. So if I relate with the love aspect, it's like a fighting sometimes, because Twisted, Daydreams, something sounds very 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 familiar with the love area. So how do you relate the cover art with the name and the lyrics of the songs of this new album?
I think for me, a lot of those songs talk about connections with people. And with an album cover, you don't, like, at first impressions, you don't always have a lot of time to talk to people visually, because they might see it amongst a rack of hundreds of other CDs. It's only when you grab that CD or that vinyl and take it home that you might have a lot of time to really engage with it. And you know, start to tease out, you know, exactly how that cover art relates to the other songs. So like on a very basic level, it's kept reasonably simple in its visuals, just to I guess very quickly sort of sum up the album. Like I was saying before, it could be a connection, it could be pulling apart, but there's a very, you know, we understand hands, we are drawn to looking at hands, and we understand what that means. So it's a very quick way of embodying just the idea of love or connection or that sort of thing. So on that surface level, it's a very very quick way of summarizing the album. Yeah, like I was saying before, I think when you think about the context of that image and you think about the titles of the songs, they're not all necessarily positive songs. You know, a song like The Lamenting is all about things that are lost or things that have ended. And part of what the album art does as well, which is why the name and the album title are sort of arranged the way they are, is you can rotate that every way and it still reads the same. So the idea that you can look at this connection from multiple different ways, and that's a lot like love stories as well. Like it's very different to the people who are in it, to the people who are outside it. Sometimes it's very different to the two people who are part of it, or the three people or four people or however many people might be part of it. So yeah, I think like the album art is meant to just, I guess, explore all sides of what that connection could be and what it means to be fearless in love. And yeah, I don't necessarily think it all needs to be positive, and it doesn't all need to be negative. It's kind of left up to sort of how each song deals with that theme, I think, if that makes any sense.
Okay. Well, the band since 2003, I remember when I hear for Elephant 5 at that time, and it was more progressive metal. It's more like always. But as I said, since 2010, 11 years later, when the band decided to put electronic elements on more pop area than usually. So who came with the idea at that time to put this kind of electronic and pop elements into the progressive metal stuff?
I think I'd say Danny, because he's always been the man behind the keys, and he's always been one of the main creative forces behind Voyager. Like he's the only original member left in the band. And I'd say they've always been there to an extent. Like if you look at the first album, there is that track, The V Element, which is basically just a Eurodance track, essentially. Like there's mostly keys and like an electro beat and a little bit of guitar on there. So it's always been simmering under the surface. I think like if you look at an album like maybe Universe, it's maybe more in that sort of power prog metal vein. There's probably a bit less of that electronic element in there. There's no, actually you're right, sort of album, you know, Universe, then I Am the Revolution, maybe less so. And then you see in The Meaning of I, it starts to creep back a little bit because you've got tracks like Broken on there, which are pretty heavily electronic. Yes, I'd credit Danny with most of that. The interesting thing now is as a band, we all come from slightly different musical backgrounds, but we all do have a love of electronic music. Like I remember the first tour I did with Voyager. This was like in 2011, I think. I have very strong recollections of driving down some American highway in the middle of the night, and Alex is cranked on Skrillex at full volume, and we're all just like bouncing around to dubstep in the van. And it's really enjoyable music, and there's a lot to like in that sort of thing. And what I really like about Voyager is just where we're open to experimenting with whatever sounds good with our music. So yeah, I think Danny maybe the main pusher behind that because he's got the know-how to do it more than anything. Although I will say on this newest album as well, like the tracks Ultraviolet and Gren actually came out of Scott experimenting with trying to make some synthwave music. Ultraviolet was a song Scott wrote called Dark City, which Danny took and kind of sped up a little bit, and then we turned it into a Voyager song. So it's starting to creep in from all sides a bit, I think.
Okay. Now talking about the future of these Fearless in Love and promotions. So what kind of plans do you have to promote these Fearless in Love? Perhaps you will embark in tours, gigs. Perhaps you will play for the first time here in Latin America. Who knows? Because I think this album is the most promoted album that you had because you played this in Eurovision contest. So it's normally this album get more attention from the people in the digital platforms and a lot of things.
Yeah, in the last few years, we've discovered how important promotion is. Maybe we've been a bit of a silly band up until then, but especially with Eurovision, we've just discovered that like having a team behind you to help with this, because we've done it all ourselves most of the time. Our manager, our wonderful manager, Lulu, notwithstanding, of course. So now we have like some people we engage to help us get it out there, which is definitely helped with the promotion. The plans, we want to do what we couldn't do with Colors in the Sun, which is actually do a lot more touring for this album. So we're heading back to Europe in October for a month to tour the album. We've just come off an Australian tour, which was wonderfully successful and such a fun time. 2024 is looking massive for touring. We're still in the throes of working out how we're going to balance that with all of our commitments. Because let's face it, we're not young men anymore, young men and women. We've got families, we've got commitments, we've got jobs, all that sort of thing. So we have to work out just how much time we can get away. We are all desperate to get to Latin America for the first time. We've done one show, I think, in Mexico City, and that's about it. And it's a market we've talked about for years, and we really, really want to get there. So in 2024, everything's on the table. We're hoping to get out there as much as possible. So lots of touring, and we've got some big plans for what we do with this album in terms of performing it live as well. Not much that I can talk about because it's in the very early stages of planning, but we're thinking of some things that Voyager's never done before, and we're going to make a very massive show, I think, of playing this album live. So it's going to be a very exciting year next year.
Okay, nice. Well, as I said, talking about other aspects is not anymore Voyager, because we spoke about a little history, this new album, the Euro contest, the Eurovision contest, so on, and we will speak about other kinds of aspects. Now, as you can see now, well, you know about the digital platforms, and you know about the algorithms into there to recommend music, etc. This kind of aspect. And I remember to read some article through 3 weeks ago. 3 weeks ago, that this article said that the free will of the human are dead to this time, because the algorithms recommend everything. You don't like to like the 80s. I'm from the 80s, so I remember when I discovered music. I discovered music just for magazines. It's just, well, if you see a cover art that you like, hey, please buy me this. I will buy this CD for the cover art. But now this is a different time. All kind of entertainment are recommended by the algorithms. So in YouTube, in Spotify, and a lot of things more. So what is your opinion about now the algorithms are taking the control over the entertainment area? Do you think the free will is losing the battle against the algorithm?
Oh, that's a huge one. I don't know. I think it depends on how engaged you want to be. I think it's very much a double-edged sword in that regard, because, like, just speaking from Spotify, there's a lot of music that I listen to now that I would never have heard if I didn't let my playlist run out and the algorithm decide what was next. So I have to credit, the Spotify algorithms for introducing to me new music that I would have never gone and found myself. And I think that's a really good thing. I think at the same time, an algorithm can trap you in a bubble a little bit as well, which can be a bit difficult. I find, like, maybe not necessarily with music, but certainly with something like YouTube and Facebook, every couple of months I go through and I delete the tracking data that it's collected on me, or at least whatever.
I can't hear you. I can't hear you. I can't hear you. No.
That's weird.
Yeah, now I can. So I don't know why.
Oh, sorry about that.
Okay.
No, I was just talking about how, like, on YouTube and Facebook, there is an option to delete, like, your previous viewing history, essentially. So, like, for example, on YouTube, I every couple of months I'll delete my viewing history, so it kind of resets it, because I notice that after a while I get trapped in a bubble because the algorithm recommends to me more of what I like. But I don't necessarily want to see that. Like with Spotify, if I didn't see other things, I might not discover things that I don't know I like yet. So it depends if you want to engage that way. I still have the free will to go, I recognize I've had enough of that. I'm going to reset and try something different. If you don't choose to engage that way, I mean, I guess that's your free will and that's your choice to go, I don't really care about that.
Okay.
So yeah, I don't know. I think you still have the free will to control it if you want to. If you don't want to, I don't necessarily think it's a bad thing, as long as you're aware that there might be a whole lot out there that you're missing out on.
Okay. Okay. Well, talking about now, as I said, talking about the singles, now the people are love to listen singles. They love the playlist, this kind of stuff, and the digital platforms in general. So why do you continue to do albums in a world that prefers just singles anymore? And even the algorithms are creating just put it just songs, no whole album.
Yeah, I mean, we've talked about that a lot. We wonder whether the idea of making an album still makes sense in the 2020s. The reason we still do, I think, is purely not purely, but it's primarily a financial one. Recording music and doing it quite well it can still be quite expensive, particularly for what I do as a drummer. Every time you want to go in and record drums, you have to set up, and then you spend maybe 4 hours like getting the sound of everything right, and then you can start recording. So when we do drums for a Voyager album, it usually takes about 4 days. You've got maybe a day of setting up and pulling sounds, and then about 3 days of tracking. So if we were only to record it song by song, I'd have to go in and set up and pull sounds and record a song, and then do that every single time we do a song. So it still makes sense for us to, at the very least, record all of the songs in one go. With Fearless in Love, we did do it in 2 sessions. Like, we had 2 sessions where we did, I think we did 4 songs in one session and 6 in another. And then Promise was after that in the 3rd session, actually. So we did break it up a bit more this time. Because you are doubling up like the setup and the pulling sounds time, you are making it a bit more expensive for yourself if you go to a studio. We could change that by maybe just going with like programmed drums, or at the very least programmed drums that use samples from my drum kit that we've recorded from previous albums to make it feel a bit more organic. And we could do it song by song. But we've kind of discovered on Fearless in Love that the really organic, like all of us getting together and playing our songs in a room approach, really creates a good result for us. So yeah, I don't know what the future holds for us in that regard. It could be that we record all the songs in one go, but we release them, every 2 months or something, and collect it as an album, a year and a half later. In some ways, we've kind of done that with Fearless in Love, because we recorded the album back at the end of 2021 and the start of 2022. We've been teasing singles now for a year. So maybe this is our transition album to that sort of thing. But yeah, I think it's a valid question. I don't really have a good answer for it. I don't know if it makes sense to make albums. I think you can tell a story with an album, and I think you can still collect songs into an album at the end of it. But from a marketing point of view, I think single is probably where it's at, because that's how people consume music.
Yeah.
So,
well, the new generation especially consume just by
single. Exactly. Yeah. I mean, I take it from your room with all these posters. You like listening to a good album start to finish.
Yes. Well, for you, I have this Fearless in Love in CD, 5 in CD, Gosh Mild in CD. So I prefer to hear the whole album. For me, it's much better to hear the album than just the single.
I tend to agree.
I don't like, even when people recommend me, hey, you need to hear that song. Please, can you give me the album? Okay, give me the someone said the album. So now talking about these aspects, now as you can see, the algorithms, the people listen just singles. Even if we don't talk, if we don't think about it, the artificial intelligence is with this everything is now like something kind of intelligent, artificial intelligence, because the artificial intelligence recommends new songs, create art now with the softwares. Now a lot of people are trying to mix the voice from dead people, creating new songs. So this is amazing. For some way, it's amazing. I mean, even if we related this aspect, the artificial intelligence is not real artificial intelligence, because even the human still have the control to create this piece of art, the new songs, etc., etc. So for you, how will be the impact the artificial intelligence has in the future, especially for the music, for the arts in general? Because now everything is with artificial intelligence, the music producers, etc.
Yeah, I think in many ways I tend to be fairly optimistic about these sorts of things. I'm pretty excited by some of the possibilities that are out there. When you mention about like remixing a deceased artist's voice and creating new tracks that way, that's maybe the area where I start to have some questions, maybe some ethical dilemmas there, because I think maybe there's something to preserving a musical legacy to a certain extent, and not, I guess, utilizing a deceased artist's voice to convey someone else's message. Like, yeah, I mean, if I heard new songs from Kurt Cobain now, many years after there was no more Nirvana, I'd feel very conflicted about that. Something would be right. But on the whole, like, as to how it impacts like music writing and art and things like that, I tend to see it more as like another tool in our toolkit. Maybe speaking as a graphic designer, which is what part of what I do for the bands, I don't see the AI really replacing the job that I have in coming up with a solution to a problem or telling a story with the artwork for our albums. That idea is always going to come from me or the band and how we choose to represent our music. What AI might do is give me some ideas on how to, or give me some suggestions on how to visualize that idea, or take out some of the what we call the grunt work, some of the hard work in just making something. Like when I did the Promise artwork, for example, on that single, a lot of that is AI art, but it's bits and pieces. Like I couldn't type into Midjourney, I want a rocket guitar flying through space for the single. And I tried that and AI didn't know what a guitar was. So I couldn't get it to spit out what I needed. But I could tell it, create a rocket thruster. So I could make like one little part that I could Photoshop into the artwork and that sort of thing. And I think it might be the same with songs. I see some great potential in AI being like a tool that maybe helps artists come up with ideas for their songs or gives them a jumping off point. Speaking for myself and the band haphazardly, like, how do you come up with an idea for a song? You just kind of sit there and hope that something comes out of your brain. There's no tools that we really use to come up with a song, and that's an exciting process in itself, but sometimes it can be quite hard. You go to any sort of creative industry and there's all sorts of like, not mind games, but like techniques people use to come up with ideas, like six thinking hats or the scamper technique or things like that. And I think AI could be something that helps with that as well. It gives you the seed of an idea, but you can use that to help still generate your art. With that said, there will still be people who, utilize it almost entirely to create artwork. And I think that's interesting too. I think as long as, the source material is protected, and we've all heard the tales of how AI basically skims the internet for content, and that's how it generates new content. I think there's ethical questions about that, and I think it maybe should be an opt-in process rather than an opt-out process. But I don't know. Like I say, I'm optimistic. I think it's exciting. So long as there are creative people, there will be people who will use the AI creatively, and I think that's quite interesting to see what they do with it.
Okay. Well, that is true. That is true. That is true. If the people use correctly the AI, it will be great. If not, we'll have a lot of mess up.
It's like anything, right? Like, home recording software meant that anyone could be a record producer. That's given us some amazing music. It's also given us probably some really bad music. Yeah, it's about the tool in the hands of the creative. You know what I mean? So, yeah. There'll be a lot of very cheap, poorly produced AI stuff, but I think there'll be some really exciting, interesting AI stuff as well. So that's exciting. Yeah.
Yes. Before we finish, one of the last questions, where you are playing a progressive metal band, like, as I said, electronic, pop, this kind of stuff. But as you can see now, since 2000, 2012, yeah, since 2012 or perhaps 2010, a lot of bands are playing fast, very machines into their full blast beats, full a lot of machines. There are calisthenic musicians with a lot of street pickings, so very musicals, amazing musicians into the YouTube especially. So what do you think about now all the people from this from this new era in the music, in the metal general especially, are playing like a machines in all, and sometimes they forget that the feelings exist into the music, like you, because some songs like Promise or perhaps Dreamer are more feeling that is a lot of techniques into there, this kind of stuff. So what's your opinion about now this new wave of music, the musicians since 2010 that are for more faster technical calisthenic music and drummer, bass, etc. And a curious thing, about is a lot of these kind of musicians into the YouTube area that are playing much better than the original player. They're playing that much better than the original player. They don't have a good band to represent their music. They just play covers as well as much better than the original. So what's your opinion about all this aspect that progressive metal give us at the end of the 90s? Because I remember when I hear Planet X, Cosmos Squad, these kind of musicians are very gifted people that are playing Mike Pornoy, Beanie, a lot of the music very different, but now it's very different. So what's your opinion?
I think firstly, like anyone who can play like that, I'm phenomenally impressed, and in some ways very jealous. I'm not the fastest player in the world. I can maintain a blast beat maybe for 16 measures before I start to get tired. It's not the focus of my playing. I'm much more concerned about groove, and what makes you feel something when you listen to the music. But that's just my focus, like groove or volume or speed or just the timbre of your instrument. These are all things you can play around with to create music. I think if you want to focus on technicality or you want to focus on speed, I think that's going to make some really awesome, interesting music as well. Not everyone's going to like it, just the same that not everyone wants to groove. They like that precision in their music, and I'm all for that. I only speaking for myself, I feel that music is expression. For me, that expression means you hearing my imperfections, like when I mess up that part a little bit, or when when my snare is not consistently on every single 2 and 4 exactly right. Like I want to hear a little bit of that push and pull in terms of tempo. Like I want you to feel something when you listen to the music that I make. And even for me, because I sort of come from more of like a rock and a blues background as well, playing in a band like Voyager is sort of at that cusp for me, because we do play to a click track, and we try and keep it fairly precise because we're playing with synths and everything as well. It's a necessity, but I still feel like there's a bit of push and pull in terms of volume and speed and tempo and things like that. But that's just what I want people to think when they listen to my music. If someone's out there doing some 350 BPM sweep picking or some amazing double kicks, I mean, more power to them. I'm going to be sitting there watching those videos going, oh my God, that's incredible as well. I will never be able to play like that. But there'll be people out there going, this is, I want to play like that. I want to see this band live. I'm happy for everyone to push whatever extreme of music they want to. I think it's incredible, and it contributes to the richness of the music we listen to, and it influences us as well. Like you look at a song like Ghost Mile, from the same album, we chuck really, like, that's a 210 BPM blast in there. We are influenced by these things, and we borrow these things for our own music. It's not everything that our music is about, but because it's out there, we're influenced by it. So I'm keen to see what everyone has to do. Whether all of it is necessarily for me, maybe not, but it's still pretty interesting to see.
Okay. Well, Ashley, the sad times arrived at this interview. I hope you enjoyed this one like me, a terrific guy. Love this new album. It's a great one. Perhaps you want to add something to your Latin American fans and Metalero followers.
Oh, we love you. We miss you, even though we haven't been there yet, and we promise we will be getting there sometime very soon. We talk about it on an almost weekly basis. We really appreciate all of your support. We see all the comments on the videos like, come to Chile, come to Brazil, like we want to so badly. It's a little bit harder from us getting anywhere because we're in Australia, but we are working on it and we can't wait to see you.